Hey guys, so this is going to be like a paint along sort of art class sort of thing if you guys want to try it out. I'm going to provide links in the description for my photo reference and for the drawing that I'm about to present as well, so you guys can just kind of follow along with the color. You can use any kind of grass brushes, any kind of photo brushes in general. I think that'll be fine. It's not really about the brushwork, so to speak. It's more about, can you nail the color? Can you get that striking composition down, relatively quickly? So, that's the basic sketch, what we're going to do. If I were to actually trace this out, very lightly, that's kind of more or less what the drawing is. I don't think at this stage, given how simple everything is, I could imply some of these smaller shapes, like right there. The shape of the ground plane, right, is relatively something, like that. If we shut that layer off, we could see a few more beats of elements. So when I'm thinking and designing a picture like this, I'm thinking of like a lot of the movement in it. So see, there's a lot, you'll see like a lot of shapes in the actual composition, stuff like that, or lines over here, lines over here. And sometimes, when I shut that off, there'll be little heavier beats and notes of visual interest. Like over here, there's a darker, thicker patch, or over here, this shape is darker. But that's what I'm doing. I'm thinking of simple abstract shapes, and I'm breaking it down to very sort of binary notes of, thick or thin, or light or dark, when I'm trying to compose a shot design like this. The details really don't matter. So the same with the sky. I've actually stuck pretty closely with the original one. But if you think about the sky and what sort of movement and what sort of shapes it's bringing to your design, that's what's most important. I can't tell you how many students' work I've kind of gone over and critiqued this week, and the skies were complete afterthoughts, merely crippling the composition. Sorry you guys hear my daughter banging upstairs. I can't get around this. So, right, see there's little lines, little negative space. I'm trying to reinforce a lot of movement in this scene, right? Something like this. So when we actually break it down, and this is the sketch I'll, provide so you can one-to-one match the composition, everything in this scene is kind of moving, and is geared toward our primary focal element here, right? The TIE fighter. Every shape is, handcrafted, some more subtle than other, but they're all kind of creating that sense of movement, right? Sweeping and bringing the eye over, around, up, and through, and at it. They're subtle expressions of movement, and they have to be taken into consideration, no matter how much detail, no matter how much color you want to push, or if you want to do a desaturated one. So yeah, guys, I'm going to provide that drawing so you can get a one-to-one layout. You can use my reference. You could try changing the lighting. Maybe you guys can do a version of this on where it's winter, or maybe it's more fall. I just kind of have a highland sort of mountain scene. But if you follow along, if you like it, put it on Instagram or something like that. Tag me in it. I'd love to see it. So let's begin. And so if you struggle with many of the aspects of design that I just breezed over, I just created part 1, the art of designing a picture, for my patrons. This is a video geared toward beginners that have trouble making simple, elegant, and timeless compositions. It's 70 minutes in length and offers 3 different exercises demoed to show you how to routinely practice this. The overall lecture will focus on spatial principles. As always, linked below. So first up, I just wanted to go over the student sketch version. Now again, this wasn't intended for them to be like some fully completed painting or anything. It's simply kind of just like a layout color sketch. I'm not sure how much time the student had actually spent on it, but what I'm doing here is I'm kind of breaking down the design. Right now we have 2 of the TIE fighters. They're going perfectly horizontal across a fairly linear plane, resting in the same sort of space. So it's kind of lacking depth and interest in that regard. So what I'm going to try to do, and I see I've pulled up some references of the sky on the left. The student has some of their additional color sketches and layouts behind us, which, for our purposes today, we'll largely ignore. But I'm kind of showing, like, when you have a custom brush or a stamp brush that uses flowers, grass, and smoke things, if you're not careful with how you use it, as you could see here, it will be too obvious and it will kind of flatten out the overall image. So the first thing I'm going to do is try to alleviate that. And I'm coming in here and I'm basically taking a few samples from that sky, and I'm heavily inspired by what I like there. So I'm going to drop in some some lower clouds. So I'm implying that this is a fairly highly elevated position, this overall cloud, the overall mountain. I'm raising that ground plane like it's high up on these rolling hills. And so I'm starting with just that default sort of round brush, and I'm bringing in a little bit of light. I want to imply a little bit of that direction, so I need a bit of a place to start from. So I'm starting with more or less the shadow value or the shadow color of those clouds. And what I'm doing here is, on a separate layer, I have these highlights. I grab some of my favorite smudge tools, and I'm showing my student that you can push and pull the shape of the light side of that cloud to get a very dynamic sort of flow. And then that nose sky should be left, in a fairly random sense, or should be an afterthought. That a very well-designed painting, a well-constructed image, every part is fairly meticulously calculated. Now I show another part. The first part was the highlights. This is the negative space where the sky actually peeks through. So what I'm doing here is just using this Prussian sort of blue, and I'm sculpting out a shape of that. Now I know, based off that layout sketch we did previously, that my TIE fighter is going to line up on that more or less that left side. So I'm trying to paint shapes that will complement and subtly move the eye in and around that location for where that TIE fighter will be. I think that'll be fantastic. So I think right now, as a first pass, this of course is far too busy. There's way too many sharp and angular shapes in there. I actually like the simplicity of that photo a lot more. So I'm going to work on getting that back. But for now, that's a placeholder. To keep my momentum, to keep things moving forward, I do like to kind of set some placeholders in tow, and then we'll move up. So again, I have a placeholder sort of very similar tonal shift in ground or color that the original artist had. It's kind of pink and reddish, and it has a little bit of green in there. I'm gonna try to spice that up a little bit. So I just use one of my regular kind of custom brushes. It kind of makes this uneven sort of hatch, and then I of course push and pull that using the skew tool so I can add a little bit more variety. And I'm showing him you can just take a simple shape and light things up pretty high. So I copy and pasted the original TIE fighter in there, and I'm trying to position that like so. And now I'm coming back, of course, to tweak a little bit of the shapes and the forms of those clouds. And I'm doing that on separate layers so I can keep my base and just build upon some of that with a little bit more of these sharper and more well-crafted shapes. Now I know this is a little on the low res side here. This is actually coming from our Skype call, when we were having our session. So the second part of this, I went back, I recorded on my own, so it'll be a much higher res presentation. So I apologize for this. Now, I think the TIE fighter, given its material and structure, it's far too pale and not conveying enough. And I was trying to tell them here at this point too. You could tell two stories with a Crash ship in a field like this. You can have it like it's an immediate battle in Crash, where it'll have smoke, there'll be singes of dirt and embers kind of drifting about everywhere. Or you can have that more kind of carefree, more tranquil version. Well, given the current state of the world and everything, I went for the more relaxing, more peaceful option. And I told them, you could pick any option you want for this, but they will tell very different stories. So a little subtext like that can go a long way. So I'm basically sculpting in a little bit of the darker shapes, and I'm of course taking and almost ripping apart this TIE fighter, as you can see here, to just make it feel a little bit more like it's been sitting here for a while, and it's seen better days, more or less. So I kind of like where that's heading. I'm not going to focus on the details of it. That was never my intent. Now, just like for the sake of, if I want to take this demonstration, post it on Instagram or even ArtStation or something, I might go back, which you'll see at the very end, tidy that up a little bit. But if I'm just working on a nice little color sketch, if I'm planning a painting like this from a thumbnail, I'm going to keep things mostly in the realm of suggested. I don't want to get caught up or bogged down in details, and I want to think of these larger sort of, facets. And of course, I'm just revisiting that highlight a little bit on the TIE fighters here, just to kind of convey that lighting and the sense that, hey, this is a metal material, just a little bit. And now I can push and pull some of these grass shapes, as you can see back there, right and over that, so it makes it like it's sit in the field after a battle that happened a long time ago. And then, of course, this is giving you a great view of how rough that TIE fighter actually is. It's just simple, and it's kind of like a sketch, and that's all I'm thinking of it. So this part of our session only went probably about 40 minutes in real time, and this entire painting that you've seen, which I finished that evening at the Brush Sauce Hangout, which of course is linked and everything below. Everyone came and hung out. It was fun. We did a little bit of live demonstrating there. But all in all, this was like a 90 or so minute painting. It wasn't that long. It's just a nice quick color sketch. And it shows, it's goes to show you, if you do start and build a structurally sound and strong image, you can push it as far as you have the time or attention span for. You can make smaller little brushes of fields, grass and the wheat and flowers. You can make them more detailed, more lush, but ultimately it's not going to change the readability of your image. Ultimately, it's not going to make it a better looking image on Instagram or a thumbnail view. It's just going to add more detail if you blow it up or if you want to print, which is always great. So of course, this sort of thing will always come down to your specific intent. Now, I am using a combination of various grass brushes I've acquired over the years. They're from all kinds of places, and I'm using the selection tool and eraser to go into basically go into these initial shapes that I had, which, remember, it started off as just one flat sort of sphere looking shape, as the ground tends to be, and I'm just applying bits of brush strokes in and around that so that there's a little bit of line in them. And again, that's the subtle thing, and it's the hard thing to even talk about. But as you can see, there's darker little lines and there's lighter little lines or patches of grass and with elevation changes in there. And I'm doing that to just push things movement-wise a bit more subtly and a little bit more, visually interesting compared to the original. And here you're about to kind of see it. It'll jump up to my post-session process, and I always update the artist like that. So see, the quality is actually quite a bit better. And now I do a little bit of the final tweaks, and I'm just kind of just adding that last little bit, of overall polish to it. So I'm still not happy with the sky. I'm trying to simplify a lot of that. I'm trying to push and soften, a lot more of that edge. I didn't like how kind of sharp it was. So I'm giving it a run. I'm just I'm tweaking things at this stage just to kind of correct it. I finally got fed up. I was like, I got this nice photo. Whatever, I'm dropping the photo in. But that's a technique you can do, and it's honestly a technique I do fairly often, with my own paintings. Like I'm not up on some high horse here where I'm going to be above using a photo element or heck even a photo plate to kind of build a painting from. I just care about, I want to make a nice looking image, and I want to demonstrate a few different techniques. So this is something I do. I'll paint a lot of that sky, which was ironically based off this photo, and then I drop the sky into the painting, and then as you can see here, I'm going back and forth, getting bits and parts of that back. So it's kind of like a sandwich effect. Ultimately, the goal here is that it'll be a yummy sandwich to eat at the end. Hard to tell, right off the bat with it, but that can be the case in some scenarios. I just want the lighting to be soft and feel like I didn't put much effort in, but if you guys know that are watching, I put a lot of effort into that sky, making it look effortless. But with that said, I'm now trying to frame our core subject, this TIE fighter here, with a lighter blade of grass, which I suggested at the start of this. Like, I knew we were going to have to punch in a little bit of that saturation on the grass if we really want to make a little bit more of that visual hook in regards to light versus dark. Dark being, of course, that TIE fighter and the general shady or shadow side of that, with the nice the the highlights that are kind of happening in the grass in the field at this stage. And I'm doing no sort of wizardry or trickery here. These are, again, just a collection of brush marks that I'm making from my various grass brushes, and I'm trying to go in and erase a lot of those. Now, as you guys can see, like, this is not that big, on my actual screen. I'll enlarge it a little bit for you guys, but I don't work on a painting like this, particularly one I don't want to spend time on. I'm not going to zoom in and get caught up on the any element that's inconsequential. It'll just be a little bit too cumbersome. So what I'm doing here is I'm trying to layer in and add a little bit more atmosphere over that wreckage in the background. Maybe it's a TIE fighter, maybe it's an enemy ship. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not putting enough effort in to really identify that. Again, that's something I could do later on, I suppose, but I just want to show as a visual element, as an element of design. I like it back there. I think it complements this main TIE fighter rather well. And yeah, that's why. I'm basically adding a little bit more detail and a little bit more lighting to this area in the foreground. Maybe that there's like tufts of dirt, maybe there's like a footpath. I'm just cutting into that ground just a little bit. I probably would add rocks in there as well in a perfect world, but for now I'm just trying to subtly, or not so subtly rather, add this other element to the ground plane. Having all grass is fine. I have no problem with that. Let's say, if your version, similar, if you're following along with this, which I do encourage you guys to do, from time to time, just make a very similar image and follow along. We can all, practice together during these quarantine days, and yeah, just kind of help adding a little bit more direction and a little bit more of that, a little bit more of the visual elements, into the image. Have little bits of grass, sprouting up from there, have some flowers. I'm finally adding this other element as well. So I had a base, and I know if I had to call it quits at basically like an hour or so, it would have looked fine. Anything that I'm adding now is more or less toppings on that cake. So if something isn't working, I can easily remove it. And of course I can balance it very easily as well, because I think the image was already fairly balanced. So if I want to add, like I'm doing here, additional bushes, shrubs, flowers, anything to really play this scene up, I can always just, think of the painting like a dial. I can just dial it up or down, back and forth, and try to, of course, maintain that balance. Good design is all about balance, and that does take a little bit of practice. And again, these are just some of these stock bush brushes. I guess it's not super pretty up close, but far away definitely gets the job done. So that's something to be mindful of as well, is the different edges and the marks they make. If you get something, see, like this brush I'm using here, if that's too like stampy, then I have to go back and definitely adjust parts of that, because it's too forced, it's too literal. So I'm starting to offset that by just manually drawing in a bunch of loose blades of grass over that softer texture area that I have. So I'm not always trying to make every blade of grass into super crisp resolution and shapes. I'm trying to weigh the sharp with the soft, with the the hard with the lost. So like a lot of these areas and a lot of these shapes, see in the shadow, for example, by contrast, I'm trying to keep a little bit softer here. If I have super immaculate, hard, crisp shapes for all the foliage and the shadows, that it just might be a little too much. So I'm trying to keep that in a balance, keeping that in a check, adding a few little sharper little bits of highlights, to this TIE fighter here on some of the wing components. I'm sure some of you Star Wars aficionados out there will have like the exact names and numbers for this type of fighter and stuff. Will call me out on at this stage. Again, I should say I have not had an ounce of reference on that ship. It is purely from imagination, and I'll try to fix that a little bit at the end. But right now I'm just having fun sketching. I'm keeping that forward moving momentum because I'm under a tight time budget. So yeah, I'm softening a little bit of those bushes that I've added in the background to make them not quite as distracting. But I'm just trying to make this image, in contrast to that hard imperial shape of that wreckage. I'm trying to just make that nice statement by dolling up nature, harmonizing that, as much as possible. It's a nice contrast, right? Our eyes love looking at contrast. Lighter, dark, harder, soft. Direction, when something's facing a different direction, we love a contrast of scale, right? Big or small, long versus short, and so I'm playing thematically with that contrast as well in this, obviously to a fault because it's so abundantly clear, but I think it makes for a nice image, and so that's why I'm going a little bit further with that. So here I finally bite the bullet. I'm like, all right, I'm not spending any more time painting this, so I grab a little model photo of one and I just kind of blend it into my area. Yeah, that doesn't look great, but you adjust the levels on something and then just kind of adjust the color, of course, as necessary, and then do a little bit of erasing or a little bit of that's a median filter for those trying to keep up. And then I'm adding a little bit on that layer blending mode to subtly soften that a little bit. I lost my highlight and I did like my colors more, so again I'm fighting to get a lot of that back, so I'm dropping my highlight back on it. I know the TIE fighters and a lot of the older models probably would not have a nicer highlight like that, and particularly if it was extra rusty, and some things I definitely have to consider if I were to make like a little bit more of a fully realized, fully polished image. I probably would have to add more rust and things, but we'll see what I have time for. I definitely add a little bit of overgrowth and stuff like that, but see, I'm just selecting components of the wing and just dragging in. I'm looking at that texture. I'm like, oh yeah, there's some texture in there. So I just grab like one of those little line stringy sort of brushes and just doing a little bit of drag, within the selection. Just like a last little bit of detail. See, I toggle the reference photo now on and off just a little bit to help me. So see, the colors toward the bottom of the TIE Fighter are definitely a little warmer. They're picking up these greens from the grasses. It is a metal, so I'm trying to embellish that a little bit. I'm gonna add a cast shadow on the wing, or on the cockpit there from the wing, and then I have that highlight, and then the form shadow going around that, since it's kind of like a eggy bulb type shape. But yeah, and the only thing I really add, to the end of this is just a little, couple birds sitting on that. I think I extended the canvas to the left side very incrementally to kind of just achieve a little more of a center balance. But yeah, this is it. I've hoped you guys enjoyed this. I hope you guys are staying entertained and safe during these quarantine days, and do take care. Guys, thanks for watching. Please hit the subscribe if you want to see more. You can check me out on Facebook, ArtStation, and Instagram. If you want more in-depth content from me, I teach 2 courses at the CG Master Academy, Architecture Design and Fundamentals of Design. If you want even more learning, you can go to brushsauceacademy.com and sign up for one-on-one mentoring. Join the hundreds of students around the world and start improving your art and design today. If you want to be part of a community, we have Brush Sauce on Discord. We have monthly challenges and hangouts. There are links below for everything I mentioned. Thanks again for watching, and take care.